Okay, well, it's 100 degrees out in July, Georgia. Georgia in July. I'm Dan Harris. I'm a beekeeper. Started some late season nucs about 5-6 weeks ago. These are a couple I'm going to open for the first time. And we want to make sure the queens were accepted. I probably should have done this weeks ago, but like so many other things, it took a back burner. The queens that I put in were VSH queens, Varroa sensitive hygiene, a heritable trait that is supposed to improve the bees' resistance to mites, basically having them remove infested brood, Varroa infested brood. I did two things. I don't usually do late season splits, but this is a bit of an experiment. And I'm going to move this down a little bit and leave myself a working area here too. Late season nucs are just an extra chore around here, generally speaking, but I'm trying this in hopes that it'll allow me to have early season splits available either for sale or to put in spots where I've lost hives during the winter or over the season. When I've tried to introduce VSH queens into highly mite infested hives, historically it hasn't worked very well. And reasons I think are pretty apparent. What winds up happening is the first round of brood rearing usually goes pretty well. There's usually a solid brood pattern, everything looks hunky-dory, but you have to keep in mind that those first batch of nurse bees are from the donor hive, and the donor hive probably does not have that particular trait. So this is a nice looking frame. You can see that there's brood, relatively nice solid pattern of capped brood on the outside. I doubt if you can see down in these cells, but there's larvae. They're beginning to cap brood in the middle. At about 5 weeks, this queen's progeny should be beginning to be the nurse bees in this hive. And so what happens generally when I try to introduce, the donor hives were pretty severely infested with Varroa. And so what normally happens is that first round or so of brood is pretty nice and solid looking, but then thereafter it gets really spotty, and it's because of that that trait starts to exhibit itself. There's the cage the queen came in, and again this is about 6 weeks old, so 5 or 6 weeks, so it's not surprising that that's been opened up. This is probably not a bad looking pattern for a new VSH queen in my experience. It's a bit spotty, but it's not awful. I mean, it's not horrible. I expect a certain degree of spottiness. These started out as heavily infested with Varroa. It's just the way a lot of my hives are at the moment because of the time of the season. What I did when I put these nucs together was I, at the same time, installed Apivar strips. Apivar active ingredients amatraz. It's a synthetic compound. I don't usually use it. In fact, this is the first time I've ever used it. But I knew that it would be in these hives during the heat of the summer, and it is one of the least disruptive in the hive, yet effective. I'll show you the strip in a second. They probably have another week to be in there. Nice looking brood pattern on that. Again, a bunch of emerge. So see, we're pretty far into the that's the Apivar strip, by the way. we're pretty far into brood rearing in this hive. So by now we should be seeing a lot of the VSH bees as nurse bees, and as a consequence, if the varroa population was excessive, this brood pattern would be even worse than that, noticeably worse. And the problem with trying to introduce a VSH queen into a varroa infested hive is that I have had okay success doing so. It takes a long time for the VSH trait to finally beat the mite population back, and some hives don't survive it because the cost of brood rearing is tremendous in a hive, and especially in a new hive. If you think about it, there's the queen. She has a yellow mark, clearly the queen that was installed, the VSH queen that was installed. Everything looks good. So what happens, the amount of energy expended in brood rearing, and in particular with the VSH trait in brood rearing that fails. Let's say that 30% of the brood that is developing gets capped. All of the energy and resources that went into that brood are wasted if it is removed, and that's a phenomenal expense, a tremendous expense on a colony of bees that is new and just underway, probably with a relatively low population because it's a new split. And so oftentimes they don't survive because the tax is so high on them. So my intention this particular time was to install the apivar strips at the same time that I started the nuke, in hopes that they would beat the infestation back to an acceptable level. And by the time the VSH bees became the predominant nurse bees, the population would be low enough that the infestation would be low enough that the bees would be much more successful in their brood rearing. And it's still a little early for me to say that that's been successful, but I have high hopes. I'll be back in these hives in a few more weeks. Right now, basically, I'm just giving them a quick inspection to make sure the queens were released and are laying. Again, it's something I should have done a long time ago. And making sure that that everything looks normal in there. I'm going to add in this particular hive a super, another deep with some comb that I removed from a dead out earlier in the week. It's comb that I'm trying to preserve. I'll put it right on top of this hive in another deep box, and I'll feed them, and I'll continue to feed them through the rest of the summer, because we are certainly in the middle of a dearth here, and we'll get them all ready for winter, and hopefully by spring there'll be nice, beautiful, vigorous VSH hives ready, as I say, to go into my yard early in the season, or for a nuke customer to buy. Anyway, that's my plan. That's my experiment. So far, so good.